Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Goodrum Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Apologies for no show last week. I'm currently in the process of decorating the bedroom, and so the contents of the bedroom are in the study, which is why I'm here in the kitchen. It's a bit of a throwback episode, isn't it? It's been a long time since I've done an episode of the show from the kitchen. As you can probably see, the colour of the kitchen has changed as well. So anyway. Enough jocularity. Let's talk about some serious stuff. Okay, so yeah, whiskey. What am I doing today? Right. Okay. As I said a few episodes of the show ago, the whiskey industry has a tendency to sort of wake up in February. January is obviously a bit of a dead month, and I guess sort of right. They decide upon what they're going to do for the year, all that kind of stuff, and so I'm kind of playing a bit of catch up with sort of new releases. So today's episode of the show is about the new releases in the Morrison Distillers Carn Mor Strictly Limited range. These were obviously new releases in February, so they've been out for a month or so, but obviously only being able to do one episode of the show a week. I have all these kind of episodes planned, and some happen, some don't, and sometimes it takes a while to sort of catch up with these things. But so I thought this week would be nice to take a look at some new releases, and yeah, it's always a bit of fun, isn't it? So I'll better pour some stuff in the glass, and I'll get back to you with the lineup in a minute. Can't see what they're trying to blind me from the truth. Right, okay, so we're going to kick off with an 11-year-old Mannochmore. This was distilled in 2010, obviously bottled in 2022. It's 11 years old, bottled like all of the Strictly Limited range is at the moment at 47.5, aged in a bourbon hoggy or hoggies. They used to say how many casks that were vatted together for the Strictly Limited bottling, but I don't know whether that information has now fallen off the label, or I just didn't have it. But anyway, so I don't know the amount of number of casks, but all American oak bourbon hoggies. Right, bottling number 2 we're going to be looking at is a 10-year-old Glenburgie, distilled in 2011 and bottled in obviously this year, 47.5%. Again, first fill, bourbon barrels, apparently. Number 3 is an 8-year-old Glen Keith, distilled in 2013, bottled this year, and Oloroso casks. One imagines butts, I imagine. Next bottling we'll be looking at is another Glenburgie 10-year-old. This is been matured in Pedro Ximenez hogsheads. So obviously one assumes American oak seasoned with Pedro Ximenez. Distilled in 2011 and bottled this year. So again, 10 years old. Next bottling we'll be looking at is a Ben Nevis. I haven't come across a Ben Nevis in ages. I mean, I haven't come across a distillery bottling of Ben Nevis. I mean, God only knows what's happening there. Anyway, so yes, this is a 7-year-old Ben Nevis distilled in 2015. And again, sherry butts, as often is the case with Ben Nevis. And the last bottling we'll be looking at today is called a Whitlore. Now I haven't got a clue what the Whitlore was, but apparently it's a Highland Park. So this is a 7-year-old Highland Park, distilled in 2014, STR cask finish. Now I don't know whether the juice was put into an STR cask at Highland Park, or whether this was done by Morrison Distillers. I must admit, I've never come across an STR finished or Highland Park doing anything other than American oak and sherry. I mean, I could well be wrong, but then I don't have any direct dealings with Highland Park, so couldn't really tell you. So I'm going to come to the conclusion, and I could well be wrong here, that this was something that Morrison Distillers have decided to do. And why not? Bit of fun, STR cask finished Highland Park, STR cask finished young Highland Park. Oh well, we shall see when we get there. Anyway, so that's today's lineup. Let's kick off with the Mannochmore then, shall we? Right, okay, so let's see what the Mannochmore gives us then, shall we? Quite crisp, quite fresh, quite grassy, sort of typical Spey style. Some creamy oak, minerally, honeyed. Getting quite a bit of a nose prickle. I mean, although the ABV isn't, well, depending upon who you speak to as well, I mean, I don't think it's particularly high, 47.5, but it's certainly noticeable on the nose. I mean, yeah, it's pleasant. So that's one. Again, creamy oak, grass, citrus. It's a bit on the short side, it has to be said. There's a little bit of an industrial note, a little bit of burnt toffee. I mean, there's nothing to sort of get too upset about. No, it's pleasant, young, grassy. Like I said, a little bit short, vanilla. Yeah. Without any prospect. Right, okay, so let's move on to the 10-year-old Glenburgie. So first fill bourbon barrel. Let's see what that gives on this end, shall we? Yes, there's some oak there. Probably not quite so much oak as I was expecting. You know, it's slightly creamy, but there's a lovely citric note there as well. It's got freshness. There's a little bit of grassiness, some celery. Almost a sort of pastry kind of note. Lemon, yeah, some nice oak. It's, yeah, I mean, it's, for first fill bourbon, like I said, I'd be expecting a lot more bourbon. I'd be expecting it to sort of whack me in the face with vanillins. But this is actually pretty well balanced, I think. Let's see what it balance like. Yeah, alright, there's a lot more oak on the palate. It is sort of masking the finish a little bit. The tannins are kind of coming in and drying the finish just a little bit. But it's pleasant, it's really citric. I mean, Glenburgie can be quite hit and miss at the end of the day. I mean, I've had some real rough ones. So this is really nice and clean and fresh and barleyed, citric, minerally, lemon. Yeah, there's some vanilla oak. It's not too oaky though. I mean, like I said, yes, it does kind of shorten the finish a little bit. So I think for some people would probably find that a little bit of a but you know what? I quite like that. I thought the balance was really quite good. So so yeah, that got a big thumbs up from me, I think. Right, okay, so let's move on to the Glen Keith. So this is 8 years old, Oloroso. Let's see what nose gives us. Clean for a start, no sulphur. That's a good start, isn't it? No distillery character whatsoever. It's dried fruit, sherry, dried fruit, treacle, ginger. And that's about it, really. It's kind of, it is what it is. Yeah, I can't get a lot else. It is just basically sherry. I mean, Glen Keith is a lovely spirit, it has to be said. Well, I'm afraid I'm not really getting actually any spirit character here whatsoever. So, I mean, you know, it's not bad. I mean, like I said, it's very clean. It's pretty simple, straightforward. But then it's 8 years old, you know. Anyway, let's see what the balance like. Very toasty, actually. I wonder if these are heavily charred casks, because it's certainly really toasty, really charred. Lots of, more so, that characteristic seems to be more prevalent than the sherry dried fruit. Yes, it's got some sherry dried fruit, it's got a little bit of treacle, some prunes, walnut. Again, pretty short. Alcohol is quite nicely contained. It's got a good, nice mouth feel. It is what it is at the end of the day. It's an 8-year-old sherry matured spirit. You know, you could taste that and you'd have no idea what distillery it was from, because I certainly couldn't tell you. Apart from the fact that I know it's Glenkeith, but you know, if I was tasting it blind, I would have no idea whatsoever. But so, if you like that type of whiskey, it is perfectly pleasant. Yeah, nothing wrong with it at all. Just for me, as you well know, doesn't quite have the balance. Right, okay, so let's have a bit more sherry then, shall we? So this is the Glenburgie 10-year-old Pedro Ximenez Hoggy. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Oh yeah, that's PX. I mean, that's soft, silky, pruny, winey, treacly. I mean, you know, if I thought that the Glenkeith had no distillery character, nothing here at all. I mean, it is PX. I mean, it's just like smelling sherry at the end of the day. A little bit of black pepper possibly. Again, it's very clean. There's no sulphur blemishes, and nowadays, when you think about how tight the whisky industry is with regards to wood policy, you know, there's no excuse now for sulphur-tainted sherry butts at the end of the day. I mean, they still exist, obviously, but given the fact that you have so many distilleries banging on about how they have contracts with certain producers in Spain, or certain cooperages and all this kind of stuff, you know, there really is no excuse now for sulphur-tainted whisky. So yeah, it's clean, it's PX, and that's pretty much about it. Let's see what Pal's like. Rich, treacly, slightly spicy, plenty of dried fruit. It's just like the nose. It is PX sherry. I mean, the alcohol's obviously balancing it, so it's not too sweet. I mean, if this was a Pedro Ximenez sherry, then this would be really cloyingly sweet. But you know. The comments are exactly the same as the comments I made about the Glenkeith. There's no distillery character there, there's no balance, it's just one-dimensional, although there are people that, you know, customers and viewers and that like these kind of whiskies. Again, for me, it just lacks complexity, and at the end of the day, for me personally, it lacks any real interest, because it just could be a whiskey from absolutely anywhere. So anyway, that's that one. Okay, so let's move on to the Ben Nevis, and let's see what the nose gives us on this thing. Now, there are some distilleries that are very suited to the use of sherry, as we well know. I mean, think Glenfarclas, Glengoyne, and Macallan, for example. But you know what? Ben Nevis just is one of those distilleries that seems to sort of work so well. I'm getting the classic bready, doughy, malty spirit character, and that is forefront. Yes, there's some sherry dried fruit, but it's sitting in the background. It's just. Although like I said, there are some distilleries that are well suited to sherry that you probably wouldn't want to taste the spirit, but in this instance, the balance is really spot on. Plenty of distillery character, bolstered by a bit of sherry. This is just spot on. This is the way to do it. all right, it's kind of not very complex. It's only 7 years old, for goodness sake. It's got a nice vibrancy, it's got a youthfulness, there's some spice. It's not too young, which is pretty amazing, and just goes to show you that, you know, whiskey should be bottled when whiskey is ready to be bottled, and age is just a number, etc. Yada yada yada, you know, all that kind of stuff. Basically, you know, this is actually a really good nose, really pleasant. I'm really enjoying this. A little bit creamy now, but still, yeah, plenty of Ben Nevis character. Anyway, let's see what we pass on. Doughy, malty, rich, full. Again, classic Ben Nevis. A little bit of an edge, I will say. A little bit of a, not a roughness, there's an edge there. Almost kind of citric kind of edge. Again, the sherry dried fruits are sat back in the background. Yes, I'm getting sort of raisinade fruits and sultanas and dried grape. A little bit of peat smoke right through on the finish as well. Just gorgeous, lovely, absolutely fantastic, beautifully balanced, lovely progression, and like I said, you know, I don't hate sherry. You know, I like sherry in proportion. It's just the same with everything. It's all about the balance. You know, I don't like whiskies that are overly bourbon oaked. The same way I don't like whiskies that are overly sherried as well. This is what I want from a whiskey. I want progression, I want distillery character, I want balance, and that has it in bucketfuls. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Right, okay, so on to the final whiskey of the afternoon. This is the Whitlore 7-year-old Highland Park STR cask finish. Let's see what the nose gives us on nothing. Well, I wouldn't have pegged it for Highland Park. It's actually quite elegant. Ooh, yeah, get the knife in there. Yeah, okay, so it is quite wine influenced. There is a sort of a maltiness, a richness, there's some salt, but the wine is kind of quite sort of forward, some red fruits, a little bit of spicy tannin. But there's a fruitiness beneath that. There's a sort of an almost kind of bubblegummy fruitiness, almost estery, and it's kind of like, they're not words that I tend to equate to Highland Park. Fruity, estery, no, not certainly not Highland Park under 18 years of age anyway, or under 15 maybe. So, you know, no, we're not going to go there with the 12-year-old. Honestly, I'm not going to say a word about how bad it is. Oh, sorry, that just slipped out. Quite peppery now as well. This is a lovely nose. I mean, all right, maybe it doesn't really say Highland Park at the end of the day, which is probably why they flogged it off. If they had been mucking around with STR casks and gone, well, that doesn't kind of fit our rather rubbishy flavour profile. God, so these things have a tendency to creep out. Oh, I'm going to get sued, aren't I? Anyway, look, back to this whiskey. Focus on the whiskey. Yeah, it's lovely. It's really nice. I really like this. It's a Highland Park that I'm quite happy to sort of say you should buy this. If I was a retailer, just to underscore the fact that I've now rubbished Highland Park 12-year-old, yeah, any comments I do make are my own and have no bearing or relevance to the company that employs me. Better get that one in there quick before I get sued again. Anyway, let's see what pass on. Again, quite wine influenced, fruity, slightly syrupy, red fruits, bit of peat, bit of smoke, bit of malt, touch of bitterness, but really quite nicely balanced. It developed that the peat notes kind of keep going. It's a little short, but you know, certain flavours are kind of hanging around and lingering. again, I wouldn't have known this was Highland Park. I mean, it's got that fullness, that robustness, I suppose, for want of a better word. It certainly feels like an island malt. I mean, yes, all right, it was a bit short initially, but the aftertaste is lingering. Certainly the winey notes, the peat, and the malt is kind of like lingering. You know what, I mean, all right, it's not the most complex whiskey that I've ever come across. But it's interesting. This is again another thing that I like to look out for. You know, it's kind of like it's a Highland Park, but it's called a Whitlaw. You know, it's like kind of people would look at it on the shelf and go, "What the hell's that?" And it's a selling point. Thankfully, the whiskey is really good. I mean, if the whiskey was absolutely dreadful, there's no point in buying it whatsoever. And all right, maybe it's not sort of typical Highland Park stuff, but that's part of the fun of it. That's you know. Like I said, that's just one of the more endearing qualities that this particular whiskey has. The fact that it's not rubbish. Anyway, right. Better sum today's episode of the show. Right. Okay. So today's episode of the show. Yeah. Big thank you to Morrison Distillers for samples for today's episode of the show. I hope they're not disappointed by this review. Mannochmore, yeah, it was okay. I wouldn't say I was ambivalent about it. I mean, it was a pleasant enough whiskey. Yeah, had that sort of. I mean, some Mannochmores can be pretty grim, it has to be said, and some can be just really neutral. So it had a bit of character, a bit of that classic sort of Speyside, sort of grassy, light kind of character, a little bit of oak, and you know, overall relatively well balanced, I suppose. You know, so nothing to sort of get really excited about, but you know, it wasn't dreadful. The Glenburgie 10-year-old in American first fill American oak, I quite like that. Again, I thought that was really balanced. I was expecting, you know, first fill American oak. I was expecting lots of Bourbony character, but what I actually got was something quite well balanced. And the fact that, you know, for Glenburgie, which, as I've said, it can be very hit and miss, can be very, very variable. That was actually a really good bottling. The Oloroso matured Glen Keith. Well, I can say the same for that as I can say for the Glenburgie in PX. It was all about the sherry cask at the end of the day, Oloroso and the PX. So no distillery character, no real sort of interest for me, it has to be said, but a perfectly good whiskey, good quality. Certainly, yeah, there are people out there that like that kind of stuff, I guess. The one that worked for me, and it just goes to show that, you know, sherry casks can work, was the Ben Nevis. I mean, beautifully balanced, lovely length, young, yes, but not rough, and just really nicely balanced. Plenty of distillery character, plenty of the breadiness that I would expect from Ben Nevis, coupled with, you know, a subtle amount of sherry character, which is really nice. And the Whitlore, yeah, okay, I kind of quite like that. I mean, again, I liked it because it's Highland Park, young Highland Park, and it's not god awful, and it's really interesting. It's a bit different, it's a bit funky. Yeah, now I think it was mid-50s, high-end 50s, something like that on the shelf, which, yes, is an awful lot for a 7-year-old whiskey, it has to be said, but these are the days that we live in, as they say. And it was a lovely whiskey, and I'm sure that if you have that kind of budget and you have those kind of, you know, that's the sort of level of whiskey that you're happy to buy, then I've got no problem with flogging that at 50 odd quid. I mean, it was a lovely whiskey, it was a load of fun. Yeah, I still taste the peat now, in actual fact. It's gone a bit coal dusty, which is quite amazing for a 7-year-old whiskey, like I said. So, good fun. If you can find a bottle of that, if it's in your market, then, yeah, pick it up. I honestly think you won't be disappointed. So anyway, that's this week's episode of the show in the bag. I imagine, well, given how things are at the moment. I imagine probably next week's episode of the show will probably be in the kitchen again. But anyway, until next week, I hope you have a great week, and all I can say is good afternoon and good dramming.